Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host this week, yet again, Liam at the FSA Tweets. Again, don't worry, Eagle Eye viewers will be able to see that Rich is still around. He has relinquished the reins yet again. He's letting me have another go. Hopefully, my outro will be a lot better than last week. I didn't really give much thought to that. I gave a lot of thought to the intro and nothing to the outro, and it was awful, so I'm going to try again. But, Rich, bring you in after that. How are you doing, bud?
I am very good. I wouldn't say relinquish the reins. I'd say the reins are yours now. That's it. I'm no longer a host, mate. I'm just the guy that sits there and throws shade at you whenever I can. So yeah, you can fully take over the hosting duties. I'm happy with that.
Well, the torch has been passed live on air. What can you say? But no, the only reason I said relinquish the reins yet again because of that awful outro I did last week. I didn't know whether you were going to take them off me because that was an awful outro. Anyway, Rich, this week we're going to go and talk a little bit about the Combine because it was a huge event, but we're not going to go too much into it, and we're going to go straight into contract prep. And we're going to talk about some of the biggest questions that we get asked around contracts. But first, it's been a huge day of news. Tuesday, as of recording, it's been a huge day of news. I've had group chats, about 4 or 5 of them going off for about 5-6 hours straight. So, Rich, first of all, Calvin Ridley, I believe it was yesterday, Monday morning in the US, Monday afternoon here. It came out that he had been suspended last year for the rest of the season because he started betting on NFL games, which they obviously do not allow any employees of the NFL, which also includes players, coaches, media members, anything along those lines. So Calvin Ridley, although he was on the NFI list when that happened, the non-football injury list, Ridley started betting on games, and yeah, they served him a season-long suspension after they found out.
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy, quite frankly, that we're what's happened and that we're talking about it and all that kind of thing. From a dynasty perspective, I'll be brutally honest. I kind of did a quick 180. My initial reaction was, as kind of always is the case every time there's something like this happens, I think, oh, quick, go and buy the guy because his price is probably going to plummet. But actually, the more I thought about it, the more I looked into it, I'm now kind of fully out on Calvin Ridley. I really like the player. I absolutely love the guy when he's on the field because I think he's an incredible route runner that can get open. But I just don't want any part of him, quite frankly, now. He's going to be almost 30 when his contract finishes with Atlanta. So he's the 5th-year option that would have been this year has now been pushed to 2023. I don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback for Atlanta next year. So I don't particularly want any part of Ridley next year. And then am I going to want a 30-year-old free agent wide receiver? Definitely not. So I dropped him down. He's now my wide receiver 46 in my ranks. And to be honest, I'd pretty much take any second-round pick I can get for him. I mean, it's a fall from grace from a guy that was a top 7 receiver for me as little as 12 months ago.
Crazy.
Properly crazy, but I just don't trust him, and I don't think, if you're going to sit and hold the bag, yes, if you're in a complete rebuild, maybe go and take a punt. You might get an elite receiver in 2023, but yeah, I'd rather just move completely off him and take as many decent picks as I could get. But yeah, I'd take a second right now.
It's definitely an interesting one. I've seen a lot of takes here and there. I was like you, I looked at buying, and then the more I thought about it, the more that I realized that it was a 30-year-old wide receiver when he probably next plays. I kind of 180'd on it as you did, but I don't think I'm selling for anything I can get right now. I do think that when he plays, his price will go up more. Yes, it'll be 30, and we don't really know who the quarterback is going to be, but I think that's got a bit of a chance to upgrade and get more than just a random second. But today has been quite a busy day, as I said, news-wise. So it's been quote unquote, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of been dubbed as a tag a tight end day. I've seen on Twitter a lot. So the franchise tag news has been dropping a little bit. You've got Dalton Schultz slated to get the franchise tag. You've got Mike Gesicki and David Njoku for the Browns. And then you've also got Adams and Godwin, so Davante Adams and Chris Godwin, both slated to get the franchise tag as well. Rich, any names in there that are really shocking to you? I think the biggest shock to me was Njoku, just because I didn't expect a backup tight end to be franchise tagged. But
yeah, I mean that was shocking. I'm surprised that they're going to pay. What is the tight end tag? It's about 10 million this year. I can't believe they're going to pay 10 million for a guy that they didn't use last year. Quite frankly, I know Cleveland love a tight end, but I presume this means Austin Hooper's gonna, time's finished up in Cleveland. Hopefully, it means we might see Njoku move on. I'm a little bit disappointed because I'd quite fancied Njoku to come to the Jets and maybe kind of fill a hole there, but never mind. Dalton Schultz, I think we talked about this, I want to say 2-3 weeks ago. This is kind of what we expected with the way the Cowboys cap was going, and he was talking about wanting 15 million. Well, why would you pay a guy 15 million a year when you can just tag him at 10? That makes a lot more sense. The Gesicki one for me is really interesting because I know he's made a lot of noise about wanting to be considered a wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see if he goes into arbitration to try and, back like Jimmy Graham did. What would that have been, 7-8 years ago? Tried to argue that he was a wide receiver rather than a tight end, so he'd got paid more money on the tag when he was at the Saints. I think we could see Mike Gesicki, who, let's be honest, is a wide receiver, lines up out of the slot. I think it was 90% of the time last year. That'll be an interesting one to watch. And the Godwin and Adams deal, I'm a little bit surprised Tampa has tagged Godwin because obviously it's the second year, so it's even more expensive. But I'm not shocked that they're not wanting to let him walk out the door. And Adams, look, we always knew Adams wasn't leaving, didn't we? It didn't even matter if Rodgers was there or not. Adams wasn't going anywhere.
Well, yeah, the news has just broke that both Davante Adams and Chris Godwin have been officially tagged now. I know that the Bucs are trying to get a deal done with Chris Godwin before they tagged him, but both have officially been tagged. So I think that's like 18 mil, 17 mil for them. Quite a considerable amount.
It'll be bigger for Godwin because it's his second year, so it's 120% of the tag for last year, I believe.
Yeah, I forgot that he was tagged last year too. But moving on from the tagged wide receivers, and we'll sit with that position group. Mike Williams got a new deal. I believe it was 3 years, Rich, 60 mil.
Yeah, big money. That. Big money, 3 years, 60 mil with 40 mil guaranteed, which
is huge.
I said to you just before we came on that feels like a bit of an overpay. I think, yes, he's a prototypical X receiver, but I think he's one of those, yes, he plays the X, but he's really a wide receiver too. And paying someone 20 million, it feels expensive. But when you've got a cheap rookie deal, you've got that cheap rookie quarterback deal, it means you can go out and make these moves, doesn't it? And when you can go out and spend the money to build around Justin Herbert, why not? They have plenty of cap space. I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with potentially a couple of holes on that offensive line and massive holes on the defensive line. But he's a decent guy to come back in, but for me, a slight overpay, I think.
Yeah, so moving on, because we need to get through this quickly because we do have a big show to get to. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers for the next few years at least. They have got a new contract, but we don't know what that looks like. We saw some numbers, 200 million for 4 years or something like that, but Pat McAfee, who broke the original news that Rodgers was going back to Green Bay, has then said that that's not true. So we don't actually know what the contract looks like, but if they've been able to tag Adams as well, I can only assume that contract is hugely beneficial for the Packers cap this year. But I do expect some sort of cut to come in the next few weeks, or in the next few days, before the new season or the new league year starts.
Yeah, so they've
to be able to afford all of that.
they've got 8 days, haven't they, to try and get the contract finalised, because they don't need to get under the cap until the 16th. So they've got 8 days to try and work out those final numbers. I personally think that Aaron Rodgers, he's probably signed the contract and it was all done and dusted, but he was just a bit annoyed that Russell Wilson stole the thunder and stole the headlines. So he needed to throw his toys out the pram and get back in the headlines again.
Well, you teased it, Rich. Russell Wilson is now going to be a Bronco. How do you feel about that? So the full trade, from what we know right now, is Russell Wilson going to the Denver Broncos for, I believe it was the D-line Shelby Harris, Drew Lock, quarterback, and the tight end Noah Fant. And then there are picks that still haven't been confirmed. So I don't know whether you've seen anything else on that.
Yeah, so it's 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a 5th, and then those 3 players, and then Denver are getting back a 4th. Now, I've not seen years confirmed, but yeah, that's the total pick haul.
That's crazy. Do they have a 22 first this year?
Yeah, I think they've got I want to say 9th overall, but that might have been last year. Is it 13th this year? I can't remember. It's a decent first. I mean, I personally think this is a great deal for Denver, and I know some people might be shocked, but I think this is probably a little bit of an underpay. When you think that Jamal Adams is going for 2 firsts, I think the price for any elite quarterback, and I'm still keeping Russell Wilson in there, has got to be 3 firsts or 4 firsts. So if you're getting, an expensive bust at tight end in Noah Fant, okay, a very good defensive player in Shelby Harris, and then Drew Lock, who's a backup quarterback at this stage, and 2 firsts and 2 seconds. I think that's a great deal for Denver. I wouldn't want to be a defensive coordinator in that division, I have to say. You got Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, and Derek Carr. That's certainly enough to keep you up at night. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic deal for Denver. I think for Seattle, it'll be interesting to see where they go. Obviously, Pete Carroll's not exactly a young coach. There's rumours that they might be trying to trade Lockett and DK. So it's interesting, a little while after you've paid 2 firsts for Jamal Adams and sort of gone all in, you're now looking at blowing it all up.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think from a dynasty perspective, Liam? Do you think this is good for anybody in particular, bad for anybody, or?
I definitely think it increases Cortland Sutton's stock right now.
I love that pick with Wilson.
He massively underperformed in a lot of people's eyes last year just because he was coming back off an ACL. I mean, they had who at quarterback last year? I mean, Teddy Bridgewater, but that's it, really. I know that I love Teddy Bridgewater, kept 3 top 25 fantasy wide receivers in 2020, but he's not that type of quarterback to do it in every system. And so I love it for Cortland Sutton because I think he's going to come back fully healthy. And now having Russell Wilson rather than Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock throwing him the ball, it's going to be great. And I know that you're waiting to tell the listeners about your boy, so just let you go. Go on, I'll let you free.
I think first of all, on the Cortland Sutton, I think it's a fantastic fit for him in that Russell's going to push the ball downfield. Yes, Teddy Bridgewater is your favourite stat, isn't it? It's produced 3 top 25 wide receivers in Carolina, but he didn't fit with Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton needs the ball pushed downfield. He needs those 50-50 chances, which is what Russell Wilson does. I'm really excited for what Cortland Sutton is. I think everybody's going to go out and start hyping up Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. But to me, the 2 biggest winners of this, that I absolutely love Albert O. I've been talking about him for 2 years. We talked about on this very podcast in January. I said to you, I think Albert O is actually the better tight end in Denver, and people just don't realize it. And maybe Denver finally listened to me and shifted out Noah Fant and have unleashed Albert O. I think, look, for me, Albert O is. I need to go away and do some proper deep dives into where I'm going to put him. But he was my tight end 19 before the trade. just looking at where I'd have him, I think he probably could sneak up to sort of tight end 13 or 14 around the Hunter Henry, Cole Kmet, ahead of the likes of Tyler Higbee and Logan Thomas. So I'm really excited about Albert O. The other guy that I think is probably going to get slept on over the next kind of week whilst everyone goes into hype is going to be Tim Patrick. Obviously, he signed that deal last year. A little bit surprising, but I think he's another guy that's going to fit into what Russell Wilson wants to do. Do you think on the Seattle side, what are you doing now, Liam, with Noah Fant, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf?
I think DK is a pure hold right now. I mean, yeah, you could probably get a lot for him, but I think that price has just dipped and you're not going to get anything remotely close to what you would have done for him. Lockett, we talked about it in pre-show. You rightly corrected me when I thought that he signed a 4-year deal last off-season. It wasn't. It was the season before. So he's got 2 years left, and it's an extremely tradable contract, as you said. So Lockett, if he goes elsewhere, could be a sneaky kind of grab. He's not that old, but at the same time, he's definitely not young. So I do think Lockett is a sneaky kind of could vary in value in the next, say, 4 months or so. His value could be completely different from now into July, basically.
He's the kind of guy that people, because he had that amazing relationship with Russell Wilson, people are going to go out and panic. And I could see his price absolutely plummeting over the next few weeks. But as we said, he's got that really tradable contract. It wouldn't shock me if we saw him moved to an interesting team and around the draft for a third or a fourth. What happens if MVS is going to leave Green Bay and you saw Tyler Lockett in Green Bay? As we said, his contract this year, the cap hit in terms of base salary is 3.3 million. So what would stop if as a Packers fan, Liam, if I was to say to you, MVS walks, but you can send a 3rd round pick to go and get Tyler Lockett to play opposite Devontae Adams, how excited are you?
I'd be doing more dances than I was doing earlier when I heard Aaron Rodgers had signed a new contract. That would be incredible if we could have a Lockett type receiver right next to Devontae Adams. I think that would fulfill what Rodgers wants from the Packers. It'd just be incredible. Anyway, Rich, let's stop talking about the news because we always spend way too long on the news.
Hey, today,
big news today.
I'm never the news guy. I never want to do a news podcast. I never want to talk about it. But today, it felt worthy. I mean, I did enjoy that. I was typing out the news, significant news this morning, and I literally put Calvin Ridley, and then I thought, there's nothing else. We'll leave it there. And then we've just spent 20 minutes talking about the news.
Yeah, but let's move on, Rich. So you wanted to talk about the combine. So I didn't manage to catch a lot of it. I saw the second group of wide receivers doing their 40 times and a couple of the drills after that. But that's probably about it. So do you want to take us through a couple of your winners and losers from the combine?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kind of cover it. I know the college guys are going to dive into it in a hell of a lot more detail than I could ever dream of. But just from a fantasy perspective, I guess, a couple of winners and losers from me. So I think Chris Olave, yes, he ran that rather ridiculous 4.26 that unfortunately got dropped down to a 4.39 official. I felt really sorry for him. He ran that 4.26 and was like, right, I'm done. That's it. I'm never running faster than that. And then they came back and said, "Oh, it's actually a 4.39," which is still impressive. But
I remember watching that. That was incredible. I was like, "Oh my look! If that's how fast Chris Olave is running, the rest of this class is going to be insane." They were talking about records being set of the amount of under 4.4 wide receivers running, and it was incredible. And then. Who was it? Was it Thornton? I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, the guy.
Unofficial 4.21, and that was incredible. And then, I put the phone down, went to sleep, woke up, and none of it was real. It was like a massive dream.
Yeah, I think it's it's interesting because the thing I've sort of read today is that Indianapolis put in a new turf in 2020, and this is the first combine that's been run on it. So they were saying that yes, it's a fast class and there's records blown across the board, but actually it could be, a slight nod to the fact that it's a faster track than we've seen previously. But I think, look, Chris Olave, he's my wide receiver 2 as we speak. I think this firmly cements him as a kind of top 24 pick in the NFL draft. And I think he's going to be a great kind of dynasty buy, because I think a lot of people are hyping up other wide receivers, and I think you can probably get Olave at the back end of the first round come rookie drafts. I'm really excited at that value you're going to get there. Other big winner, my running back 1 in this class, Breece Hall. He kind of ran out the stadium, a weight-adjusted speed score in the 120 mark. Was basically the final tick in the box in terms of my rookie model and rookie prospect profile. He basically ticks every box, and as long as he gets kind of decent day 2 draft capital, he's going to be really, really high. Just to give you some kind of concept, he is, in terms of my pre-draft model, which isn't as accurate as my post-draft model, I'm hasten to add, he's the 5th highest prospect ever since 2003. He is one spot ahead of Jonathan Taylor. He's pretty much ticks every box that I like to see from a rookie running back. Let's just hope that he gets potentially back end day 1 draft capital, but day 2 draft capital, I'll be really excited.
So you heard it here, folks. If Breece Hall doesn't live up to Jonathan Taylor's hype, then...
Oh, I didn't say that.
I'm only playing you off. Yeah, that was purely pre-draft, and Rich doesn't trust his pre-draft model. That's now what he's saying. Yeah. We've got plenty of shows lined up that we're going to be breaking down these rookies in much more detail, but I just wanted to give a little tease. And then losers for me. So I think the biggest loser from the wide receiver room was Treylon Burks. I think people were massively hyping up him as, this incredible freak athlete. I heard comparisons of Calvin Johnson, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, and basically tested as a good athlete, but not the elite level athlete that we hope to see. I'm a little bit lower than consensus on Treylon Burks. I know there was some talk that he's the 101 overall. That's far too rich for me. I think it'll be a case of kind of cooling the jets on Treylon Burks. And then the last little kind of cheeky loser, Kenny Pickett has tiny hands, so can't throw the football. Obviously, Kenny 2 gloves Pickett. He's had to play in these gloves. I know there's talk of this double jointed thumb that enables him to grip the ball better, but I think the facts are there. Any quarterback under 9-inch hands doesn't really succeed in the NFL. So I'm really intrigued to see if that one little tiny thing is going to really affect his draft capital and could potentially slide down the board come May. Honestly, Kenny Pickett, it's bad enough that you're talking about his small hands, but when you called him a cheeky loser as well, that's a bit harsh. Come on, Rich. But I was looking at the quarterbacks that had smaller than 9-inch hands, and you saw, if you're on Twitter, you saw probably everywhere, everyone giving you like lists of people or quarterbacks that really didn't succeed. And then the one guy that I noticed wasn't on any single list, but definitely has smaller than 9-inch hands, was Michael Vick. Now, I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett's going to be Michael Vick, but I knew that's where you were going, Rich, so I had to jump in before you could.
I choked there that you were comparing Kenny Pickett to Michael Vick.
I'm not saying that they're anywhere close, but I'm just saying if you see stats on Twitter, maybe do some stat checking before you go retweeting that sort of stuff. But where do you see Kenny Pickett's best landing spot, Rich? Because I think this does massively hurt his draft stock.
I'll be honest, I've not done enough work on terms of landing spots, and I think today has shown that the quarterback landscape's changed massively. I think he's always been talked about potentially landing in Pittsburgh. I'll be honest, I just don't really care where he lands. I don't particularly want him from a fantasy perspective. I think he's a really underwhelming prospect for me. And I think if we were 20 years ago in the NFL, he'd have probably been hyped up as, the smart quarterback that started for 4 years, the old Bill Parcells thing of 1 in 4 year starters. And I just don't get it. I think from a fantasy perspective, he offers no rushing upside. I don't think he's got the elite arm strength. I just think he scares me. And I think he's probably going to be a bit of a drafter beware come rookie drafts. That being said, if he gets day one draft capital in the NFL, I'll probably dive straight back in.
So talking about diving in, Rich, let's dive into the next segment. So questions that we get on contracts. Now, listeners that have been here for at least the past year know that we talk about contracts quite a bit, and I don't think many other Dynasty podcasts really talk about contracts. They probably talk about player and values, but contracts seem to get forgotten about, and they are a huge part of the NFL, and they are a huge part of Dynasty, whether you like it or not, whether you want to pay attention to them or not. They are a huge part. So we've put together a couple of questions, and when I say we, I mean the royal we, because Rich did this, not me, where it's questions that we get asked quite often about the contract situation of players or how contracts work. And a few weeks ago, I had to message Rich because I got myself into a massive huff over, I think it was one of the Green Bay Packers.
Aaron Jones.
Was it Aaron Jones? I couldn't quite figure out what all the bonuses were because there are so many, what they all mean. And I had to go, Rich, just break it down to me like I'm a 5-year-old. So, Rich, we're going to go through some FAQs, some commonly asked questions on contracts. The first one we've got is, what is the difference between guaranteed money and total money on a contract? This one is huge for people that don't understand contracts at all.
Yeah, so I think, there's basically the way you've got to look at a contract is there's the guaranteed money that they will essentially 100% be paid, and that affects what we call the dead cap. And then there's the kind of fictional total contract. So if we're to take, a contract that's been rumored today that we've seen break in terms of Mike Williams. So he was announced as a 3-year, $60 million deal with $40 million guaranteed. Now, just reading that, I don't know the ins and outs of that contract. Nothing has been announced, but I would presume that's basically they're guaranteeing the first 2 years of his deal, and then there'll be the signing bonus in his 3rd year. So what it will probably be is something like a 16 million cap hit year 1, probably similar in year 2, and then a much bigger cap hit in year 3. But that will be non-guaranteed, so they can move on from him after 2 years, which ties in quite nicely with Justin Herbert's rookie deal, which is probably why Chargers have done it that way. So when we're talking about contracts, I guess there's 4 main things to look at, okay? From a cap perspective, or from a contract perspective, the 2 main things are base salary and signing bonus, okay? So base salary is what a player will earn as their base salary that year. Okay. So if I was to take an example, let's stick with Amari Cooper as he's in the news. So his base salary for 2022 is $20 million. Okay. Nice, easy round numbers, which is why I picked Amari Cooper. So that base salary, stick with Amari Cooper wherever he goes. So if Amari Cooper was to be traded tomorrow to the New York Jets, please let it happen. He will be paid $20 million by the New York Jets. Okay. And that $20 million will come off the Cowboys books completely. The signing bonus is an amount that is paid out to the player immediately upon signing the deal, hence signing bonus. But the signing bonus is prorated through the length of the contract. So Amari Cooper had a $10 million signing bonus. That counts he signed a 5-year contract, so that counts $2 million against the cap every year. Okay, so his contract this year, he has a cap hit of 22 million, so that 20 million base salary and the $2 million signing bonus. But the only thing that counts against the cap if he was traded is the signing bonus. So that's the 2 million. But he's got 2 million in signing bonus on his contract in 2023 and 2 million in 2024. So if he was traded, that future signing bonus gets pushed onto the current cap. So he'd have a dead cap hit of 6 million, which is why people are talking about Amari Cooper potentially getting cut, because that dead cap hit is so much lower than the base salary and the kind of cap hit overall.
And when you hear about players having savings, that is what they're talking about, is the difference between the rest of the signing bonus that hasn't been paid and that has been paid but is still on the books, and the total base salary. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, that brings us quite nicely onto our next question, Liam. So we'll probably just dive straight into it. So it's talking about how much dead money is prohibitive. When might a potential restructure? So basically, when we talk about kind of dead caps and cap hits, I view it as whenever a dead cap hit is bigger than the actual cap hit, it's pretty safe to guarantee that player is going to stay on the team, because you can't imagine a team is going to pay a player more money in terms of his cap hit to not play for them. The only recent example I can think of is Todd Gurley in LA, where the Rams were actually had to kind of take a bigger cap hit because they brought future money onto the current year in order to get rid of Todd Gurley, which is why it was so shocking. And it's the reason why Ezekiel Elliott isn't going to get cut. You know, they're talking about moving on from Amari Cooper. Ezekiel Elliott can't get cut because it would actually cost the Cowboys more money in terms of cap hit if they were to let him go.
I think with this, and this isn't me trying to push how I did it, but playing Madden and playing franchise mode actually helps a lot, because you have to use all of these concepts when you're playing the cap properly and not just clearing the cap space and basically just doing whatever you want. You have to use a lot of these concepts. I will say Madden does it a little bit differently, where the prorated bonus comes into the next year's salary cap for some reason. I don't know why they do it, but it doesn't come into the current year. But that's how I learn a lot of these concepts, is playing Madden and just getting into cap hell and not knowing how to get out. And then eventually, when I started playing Dynasty, getting a lot more interested in what all the contracts mean. But yeah, if someone has a lower dead cap hit than the savings or the money on the book, then that's when you're looking at players that could get cut. The one thing I will always say is, yes, if a team will save on a player, save $1 million, save $2 million on a player, they would still have to get a player to replace that person. So take Amari Cooper, for example, because we've just been talking about him. Yes, the Cowboys would save, I think it was 14 million in that example, right?
I think it's 16 million.
So they would save 16 million on the cap, but then they'd still have to spend some of that 16 million to replace Amari Cooper. So where the savings aren't that big, you have to kind of judge where they are on the depth chart as to where or who they're going to bring in to replace him. So Amari Cooper, even though they're going to save 14 million or 16 million, they still have to bring someone in that's quite expensive to replace that type of production. If you're cutting a lower end guy, then yeah, you're probably not having to replace them with a large contract from someone else. But equally, they've probably not got a large contract anyway, because they are a lower end guy on the depth chart.
Yeah, and the other thing to talk about when we're talking about contracts and signing bonus is the new kind of fangled thing that became the rage during the COVID year was void years, and basically teams creating void years at the end of contracts. What that basically meant was, for example, a player was signing a 2-year contract with 3 future void years. So Tom Brady did this, I believe, when he signed in Tampa.
Rodgers did, and a lot of Packers did when they did.
But what that does is it basically pushes that signing bonus because it's prorated over the length of the deal. So Brady signed a $25 million signing bonus. So rather than that being spread across 2 years and being 12.5 each year, they pushed it across like 5 years, so that it became 5 million a year, for example. Off the top of my head, I don't know if that's the exact numbers, but it basically means that it makes the cap manageable in the current year, and you're borrowing off future years' cap to help you now. So the Saints do an awful lot of this, where everybody sort of talks basically wrongly about the Saints cap, in that the Saints are in cap hell. And yeah, if you look at it, the Saints are massively over the cap. But basically what the Saints do every year on a consistent basis is they basically, it's almost like they have a permanent credit card with the cap. They borrow off next year's cap to pay for this year. So they're pushing money into future years. They're using those restructures and the void years and everything like that in order to push the money down the line in order to help them try and win now.
And in case you are wondering, void years and where a player doesn't play in that year but are still contracted and against the cap for that year, just in case anyone didn't know what a void year was, because before COVID, I didn't really know what one was. I had to go out and find out when I saw about 4 or 5 players get restructured at the Packers, and everyone was getting void years left, right, and centre because the cap went down. So they had to find a way to do it. And it wasn't just the Packers, a lot of teams that do it like the Saints. But speaking about restructures, Rich, the third and final question we've got on contracts today is, what does it mean when a contract gets restructured, and how does it affect the cap? And you've got a great example here that you put into the show sheet, and it fits in with the Saints talk because it's Michael Thomas.
So basically, what you can do, we talked about the base salary and the signing bonus, okay, and how the signing bonus proratas the signing bonus across the contract, and the base salary is a big money number in each individual year. Well, basically, what you can do with the restructure is you can take that current year base salary and you can restructure it and basically turn it into a new signing bonus. So you almost like get the signing bonus in the middle of the contract. And what that does is it then pushes that money across the rest of the contract. So, for example, Michael Thomas this year was due to have I'm doing this off the top of my head, $15.5 million base salary, okay, and a $4 million signing bonus. Okay, so he had a cap hit for this year of $19.5 million. But what the Saints did was they took $14.5 million of that base salary and they restructured it. So they then stretched that money across the next 3 years of his contract. So they've basically taken his cap hit for this year and have spread it evenly across the next 3 years. So they've basically, as I said, pushed money down the road. So it's meant that his cap hit next year is bigger and his dead cap hit next year is bigger because pushing money down the road. But it means he's now only counting $13 million against the cap rather than 17, 18, 20 or whatever it was. Okay. So basically they're borrowing off 2023 and 2024's cap to make it easier this year. And you've seen it done time and time again. You'll see it done constantly. The Chiefs are going to do this almost every year with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes signed that massive 10-year deal. It wouldn't shock me if every year where they're a decent team and think they can be a contender, they're going to take his base salary, stretch it across, turn it into a restructure bonus, and they'll just push money down the line because the cap's going up and it doesn't matter. They can just keep pushing that money down the line and it helps them win now. You talked earlier about Aaron Jones. Basically, he restructured, I think it was $3.5 million.
I believe it was, yeah.
Again, similar. He had a $8 or $9 million cap hit this year. Restructured it, so he's now only got a $5.5 million cap hit. The Packers saved $3 million this year, and they've pushed it down the line. And people often say, why does the player do that? Because A, it means that there's more guaranteed money down the line, so they're less likely to be cut. But B, it means that it doesn't affect how much they get paid. They're still getting the same money. But whilst the contract's being prorated, whilst that restructure is being counts against the cap over the next 3 years, the player gets that money immediately. So Aaron Jones, as soon as he restructured that contract, he got a check for $3.5 million. Rather than
salary
it's going throughout the season. So that's why players are quite happy to do it. That's why agents are quite happy to do it. And that's why teams are quite happy to do it. So you will see over the next few weeks, particularly, a team like Green Bay, who are supposedly going to sign Rodgers to this massive deal, they're going to restructure a lot of contracts. And the Saints do this constantly. The Saints will restructure probably 10 or 12 contracts, push some cap hits down the year, and it really helps them in the here and now.
Yeah, so that's going to conclude the contract talk today, guys. But if you do have any questions, myself and Rich are more than happy to answer anything you have on DM, or if you just want to tweet us, then we're more than happy to have a conversation and talk about it.
Absolutely. Contracts are a complete minefield, but it is one of those things that I just love contract talk. Me and my brother always used to joke when I was younger, he'd say, what would be your mastermind subject? And I'd say NFL contracts. I just love NFL contracts. So, happy to answer any questions, happy to talk about anything when it comes to NFL contracts, because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to that side of football.
But Rich, to round out the show, before we get into some of the nice new news and a little bit of plug from 5 Yard Rush, we're going to talk about some notable free agents. So first of all, we'll start with the wide receiver position, and we're going to skip quarterback completely because we have no idea what's going to happen with the quarterback market. That's been proven today that we still have no idea. So wide receivers, Rich, are there any wide receivers that you want to pick out and talk about that are looking like they're going to hit the free market right now?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting class. I think obviously we've seen that, the 3 big names in terms of Godwin, Adams and Mike Williams kind of disappear. We're going to do next week's podcast purely looking at free agency and the dynasty impact of that. So hopefully we're going to push it back later next week. We're going to do it on the Wednesday so that we've got a little bit more to talk about. But of these guys, I'm really intrigued by Juju, if I'm being honest. I think he could potentially land in a lot of different spots. And I think that he's a guy that we've seen incredible production from. And I'm really hopeful that he picks a good spot. DJ Chark is someone that I'm lower on from a dynasty perspective, but I think in terms of NFL, he's a little bit like we talked about Mike Williams, where Mike Williams is that prototypical X receiver, but is actually your kind of wide receiver 2 or 3 rather than being a wide receiver 1. And DJ Chark is that for me. He's a X receiver, but he can't be your wide receiver 1. And I'm really intrigued if he could go to a situation, trying to think off the top of my head, somewhere like a Kansas City, New York Jets, perhaps, where he can play the X. The Jets are crying out for an X, but wouldn't be the number 1 in terms of targets and wouldn't be expected to kind of carry the offense. That could be a cheaper option there. So I'm really intrigued as to where perhaps those 2 fall. What about you? Any that jump out at you?
Juju, as everyone knows, we both love a bit of Juju, so he was a main one for me. I'm interested in Michael Gallup just because of his late ACL injury in the season. I'm interested to see what deal he does get, whether it's a prove it 1 year deal or whether he gets a longer term on a lower salary or a lower monetary value, just because of that ACL, and you don't really know what he's going to come back and look like. And I think that it's a real shame for him, because I was picking a lot of him up before the season ended, because I thought, okay, Michael Gallup, free agent next year. The price is a little bit higher than it was because people are already thinking about it, but I think he's going to do well. And then he had his ACL injury, which isn't great. But he's still got time to be re-signed, and especially with Amari Cooper slated to be cut or traded, and then Schultz being brought back on the franchise tag, I think there's still room for Michael Gallup to get re-signed there and still be the number 2 alongside CeeDee Lamb. The other one that I wanted to talk about that is just interesting to me, because he's never been consistent enough for people to like fully trust, but I think he's done some good things, is Christian Kirk. And yes, you're probably taking him wide receiver 50, 60 plus, but I think Christian Kirk does have a little bit of an appeal to, say, a Green Bay, where you could probably get him a little bit cheaper than what you'd expect. I can't imagine he's going out and demanding a large contract for a long-term deal. Are those two guys that make sense to you or interest you, should I say?
Yeah, I think Gallup is. They've basically come out and said it, haven't they? Gallup's going to be back in Dallas.
Okay, I missed that.
If they're letting Cooper go, it's
I see what you mean. Yeah,
impression that they're re-signing Gallup. Christian Kirk's a difficult one for me, because he's the kind of player where I'm really intrigued by him as that slot receiver that can play exclusively out of slot. When he's got that opportunity to do it in Arizona, he's done really well. But he's so landing spot dependent because of that. Yeah. And I worry that he's the kind of guy, we saw it a few years ago with Adam Humphries when he went to Tennessee. Yeah. And he signed the big deal after, flashing with the Bucs. And yes, they're slightly different types of receiver, but he signed the big deal in Tennessee and then basically disappeared. And I think those slot receivers that, are unable to perhaps win on their own and slightly reliant on being schemed open, they can be fantastic for fantasy, but they can equally disappear very quickly. And I think that if he picks the wrong landing spot, or indeed if the wrong team picks him up, he could just disappear into nothing. So, it's sort of, I wouldn't be shocked if he was a top 36 receiver. I also wouldn't be shocked if he kind of fell out the top 60 or 70 and we never heard from him again.
Yeah, so other notable free agent wide receivers, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., Will Fuller, who signed a 1-year deal last year. There's a plethora more, but we won't go into it too deep. Rich, moving on to the running back position. Are there anyone here? I know that there's one guy that I'm 99% sure you're going to bring up, so I'll leave that to you to do. But the one that I'm most interested in out of this class is Chase Edmonds, surprisingly enough. Because I think the issue is I never thought he was good enough to be the number 1, but with Edmonds and Connor both being gone from the Arizona Cardinals, I don't think they're bringing both back. I think they're bringing one back. And regardless of where Chase Edmonds goes, I don't think that he's going to be just a random backup that just disappears. I genuinely think he's going to become a pass-catching role, like Naeem Hines, maybe, probably a little bit better than Naeem Hines, probably like more like a James White, I'd say, if he was featured a little bit more. But I don't know how you feel about Chase Edmonds, Rich.
I love Chase Edmonds. I feel like I'm a Chase Edmonds stan. I think he's elite between the 20s and never got an opportunity last year to produce in the red zone. So I'm hopeful that somebody's going to give him a home, and I hope he can be a bit more than that 1B he's been for the last couple of years. But time will tell. I think running backs in free agency is a nightmare. I know Leonard Fournette's another big name free agent. He's talking about testing free agency and trying to find a home. If he's in the right situation, he could be a fancy stud, as we saw this year. If he's not in the right situation, he's nothing. So I'm intrigued to see what he does over the next few weeks. But you hinted at him. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to talk about him, but I feel like I have to after you hinted at him. Cordero Patterson's the big name. I think with the Ridley news, I think he's definitely back in Atlanta. I think that they'll sign him to a reasonable deal, and I think that he'll be back. And I love the way that he could potentially be used. There's no wide receivers in Atlanta anymore because Russell Gage is also a free agent. So maybe Cordero Patterson is that movable offensive weapon again into next year.
Yeah, I knew that you were going, or you wanted to talk about Patterson. I didn't know that's you weren't planning on it, but that's just how good the chemistry is, Rich. I know who you want to talk about, and I have to tee you up just to make sure you do it.
So we can skip straight over these tight ends then, because all the good ones have been re-signed. Is that right?
Yes, basically. For those listeners that do actually like tight ends, and I want to clarify because I think people tend to get this wrong with me. I don't dislike the tight end position. I dislike tight end premium scoring. Just to clarify, I think tight ends are very unique position and a very versatile position that I absolutely love watching tape on. I just never understand how to grade them properly and evaluate them properly. But speaking about the notable tight ends that are hitting the market after what seemed to be National Tagger Tight End Day, you've got Zach Ertz coming out of the Arizona Cardinals, CJ Uzomah, Gronkowski, OJ Howard, and then Evan Engram. Is there anyone there you want to speak about, Rich? I mean, I don't really want to. I can move on.
I mean, Zach Ertz is interesting. You know, he produced last year with the Cardinals. I think he was top 5 tight end after the trade. Wherever he ends up, he could be a really interesting option. If he ends back in Arizona, obviously that could be really good. I can already feel myself falling back in love with OJ Howard. I'm talking myself into it yet again. Was it 5th year on the trot now? I feel like maybe if he finds a new home, maybe he can be used correctly. But yeah, look, I'm certainly not going out and doing anything proactively with these guys. They're all just interesting guys to note. I think Gronk's probably going to retire, isn't he? Let's be honest.
Probably. The one that I wanted to pick up on, if I had to speak about any of them, would be CJ Uzomah. Just because I absolutely loved CJ Uzomah before the 2020 season, before he tore his ACL. And this year, he was a massive part of that offense, even though stats-wise, he probably wasn't. But for when you watch the actual play, the amount of times they went to him in critical situations, even though they had Higgins, Chase, Boyd, Mixon, they still went to CJ Uzomah, who some people would probably argue is the 5th option there. They still went to him. And if he goes anywhere other than the Bengals, I don't think he's going to be anything other than a random tight end you're probably picking up in case of an injury in dynasty drafts. But if he's back with Bengals, I do like him as a really late round flyer. I think you probably pick him up tight end 24 plus and still have a good shot. So, Rich, that covers all the notable free agents. Now, I have no idea whether this is going to work because listeners, before we started the show, I had a little bit of a panic. I have bought a new laptop and that for some reason hasn't worked when I plugged it into my docking station. So I need to have a look at that. But I've got the spin the wheel. So Rich, fingers crossed, you will actually be able to see this in the broadcast.
It's nothing like testing things live on a podcast, is there?
Well, I had to log in as a guest on the StreamYard app, so I don't know what access I do and don't have. So, Rich, can you see that?
I can. I'm adding it in. There you go.
So, Rich, we have 5 Dynasty Listener League spots.
Exciting times.
You ready for the first name? We have had 27 applicants, Rich.
That is mind-blowing.
Some did play last year, but
let's fire through these.
Incredible amount. Come on then. So let's see the first one. Who's it going to be?
I presume you're going to reach out to all of these via DM.
Yes, I will.
Good.
I'll reach out to all of them, and they'll get an automatic
there you
addition
go.
into the league when I
host of the flagship show, Dan Hughes, the first listener into the Listener League.
He's going to be happy about that because he wants to get onto the Dynasty pod. So at least he's in the Listener League at the moment.
He gets a mentioned.
So moving on to the second one. Definitely. This looks like a fix already, Rich. Hannah Rowland, congratulations. One of the newest 5-yard rush writers. You're also in the Listener League. So 3 more spots. Who's going to be next? You have.
So far, we've had 2 people from the Listener League, and they're both internals.
Yeah, exactly. So Andy, fellow Green Bay Pack. I'm happy.
Oh God, not another one. One's enough.
There's never enough Packers fans. Okay, Rue. I'm sorry, I don't have your actual name on here. This is what you feel. I know who you are, but I'll reach out to you. And then the very last spot
drum roll
is going to go to drum roll, please. Oh, that was nearly another Packers fan of Luke Rich. Marcus Livermore.
All right, congratulations to you 5.
Liam will be in touch. Written down and they are recording. So congratulations.
Liam will be in touch with each of you.
Indeed. So, Rich.
Yeah, before we finish, some exciting news in.
I know you've got some announcements.
Some exciting news in 5-yard rush circle, 5-yard dynasty circles. So Liam and I have been busy working hard recruiting, and we're delighted to announce that we've got a new 5-yard dynasty team of writers that are hopefully going to be producing some interesting and engaging articles for all of you over the coming weeks, months, and years. So delighted to announce that we've got joining us Antonio, Dan, Emerson, Luke, Nathan, Paul, and Paul. And then, of course, we will also have Danny back, who wrote for us this year again for next year. So we're going to have hopefully loads more Dynasty content coming from all 10 of us now.
Yeah, that's crazy. We went from 4 last year with Danny and Lewis, and obviously us 2 to 10 this year. We're really pushing the boat out.
Absolutely. It was, we were blown away by all the people that expressed interest, and we certainly, reached out to a couple, and really excited to having each and every one of them on board. I think they're all very knowledgeable, very engaging, and very good writers. So keep your eyes peeled on the site. There's certainly going to be plenty of good content coming your way over the coming weeks and months.
Another little plug, guys. If you are looking at getting into writing, unfortunately, 5-Yard Dynasty have got enough writers at this point. We've got 8 in total, and then myself and Rich are going to be mostly editing. But I know that the redraft side, so Stocks and Murph, are going to be looking for writers for the redraft side. If you are interested, go ahead and contact the main at 5-Yard Rush account on Twitter, and they'll get into, or I know Murph's been taking a couple of DMs directly. Get in touch with anyone along those lines. Who was it? Rob as well?
Yeah, Rob and Pitsy are going to take charge on that side of things, and indeed, let's be equal opportunities. I don't believe in IDP, but if anyone wants to write IDP, I know Nath is potentially open to some new IDP writers. So look, if you want to start producing content and you're interested, reach out, because we'll absolutely find a potential home for you if that's what you want to do.
Definitely. One more thing before we go, Rich, we plugged it last week. and I think we're going to plug it every week until it happens because we're extremely excited about it. But the UK FFC is selling tickets like nothing else. We've
Not many
sold
left.
2/3 of tickets at the moment. I believe we had another sale earlier. I haven't checked it, but my girlfriend has been checking on my behalf. I believe we do have another ticket sale. So make sure you get those tickets. They're £10, and all profits do go to charity that we make from the event. So make sure you check us out at _UKFFC. But other than that, guys, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week for some more. I believe we're doing free agents, Rich. I may have forgotten that already.
Yeah.
But yeah, have a nice weekend, guys, and see you all next week.